Hello and welcome. It's a brand new day and you're tuned in to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Today, we're going to talk about the science of spirit possession and releasing earthbound spirits. Our guest for this evening, Dr. Terence Palmer, is with us, and he has a degree in psychology from Canterbury Christ Church University and a master's degree in the study of mysticism and religious experience from Kent University. He's been a hypnotherapist for 20 years and a spirit release practitioner for 12 of those. His doctorate was awarded by the University of Wales at Bangor, and his thesis on the scientific conceptual framework and research methods of 19th century researcher F.W.H. Myers. He is the first practitioner to be awarded a PhD on the topic of spirit release therapy in the UK. Terence is a member of the Society for Physical Research and the Scientific and Medical Network, and he is a fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine. Dr. Palmer is an active lecturer in encouraging UK institutions to take up the challenge to test the efficacy of spirit release therapy under controlled conditions. Dr. Palmer, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, hello, good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I'm fascinated by these topics, so let's jump right in. At what point did you start to have a fascination in the concept of spirit possession and spirit release and kind of that supernatural realm?
It wasn't until I actually experienced spirit possession firsthand, quite accidentally. I was developing my skills as a hypnotherapist, and I was working with a young man, and he came out of trance, and then he said to me a very strange thing. He said, someone wants to speak with you, but it's not me. So
Okay.
I invited him to go back into the trance, and this person that wanted to speak to me came through and introduced himself, and it was the spirit of a person who took possession of the young man and spoke to me.
Now, explain to me if you can. All right, you're sitting there doing this, and someone else wants to speak to you. How does that first hit you? I mean, when somebody says that to you, are you thinking you're dealing with somebody with split personality, multiple personality disorder? What was your first, thought regarding this subject?
Well, bearing in mind, this was the start of my journey into discovering these things. So I had no knowledge. I didn't know what was happening. So my first thought really was just curiosity. Well, what's happening here and who is this?
And once this person launched into this other personality, and I don't mean that in the sense of split personality, but this other being starts to take over, how do you differentiate? Are you dealing with a spirit that is a part of this person, or is it something that just what a lot of us refer to as a walk-in has just taken advantage of this situation and this opening to make themselves known to you?
I suppose you could call it a walk-in. I discovered later, and this is a long journey. This has been a long journey for me. As I said, this was the start of my experience, and there was a lot for me to learn. The spirit that spoke to me through the young man, the spirit that took possession of the young man, told me his name and told me about the work that I was doing at that time. I was actually writing a book, and he was advising this spirit was advising me on the book. And it wasn't until much later, when I was talking with friends at the university where I was studying about this, that it emerged that this spirit that spoke to me was actually a very, very well-known ancient sage from ancient China. And I knew nothing about that until he introduced himself. And some of your listeners may be familiar with the name. I certainly wasn't familiar with the name at the time. But the name that was given to me by this spirit was Lao Tzu. That's spelled Laotzu, the ancient Chinese sage from 500 years BC.
And what was his purpose? Did he select you, or were you just happen to be sitting in front of the phone line when there was a connection made?
Well, he came through to answer questions that I was asking. I'd been in business. I'd been a conference and exhibition organizer in the 1980s. And in 1990, there was an economic collapse in the British economy, and my business was wiped out. So I went down to visit friends on the island of Crete to gather my thoughts and try to find a new direction. And so I was asking these questions: what's going on here? What's it all about? And then I began to get answers to my questions, and I had an irresistible impulse to write things down as they were coming to me. And this is what I've later learned is the nature of inspiration. If you ask a question and you get the answer from other realms, from intelligent species, not of this earth, from angels, etc., it comes as inspiration, and you get an irresistible impulse to write things down. And this is what was happening. I was answering my own questions through this process of inspiration, and it was this spirit of Lao Tzu that was actually giving me the answers to write down.
And what kind of questions? I mean, how do you even begin to, I guess, wrestle with what concepts you want to cover when you have this type of audience in front of the spiritual realm? How are you, what was your methodology of picking the questioning to go with?
Well, these are fundamental questions. It's like when your whole world falls apart, when it collapses like a house of cards, and you find yourself as if someone's come along and pulled the rug from underneath your feet, and you turn around and you go, what is going on here? Why is this happening to me? What's it all about? These are fundamental questions. Why does this happen to me? What have I done to deserve this? That kind of question.
And what kind of answers would they give? When you're especially coming at it from kind of a self-interest point of view, were they forthcoming, or was it one of those kind of innocuous, well, these are lessons we all have to learn, Terence, and how did they start to respond?
Well, at the end of the day, the overall answer is yes, these are lessons that we all have to learn. But let's say I was writing the answers down systematically. I was given ideas, concepts, new knowledge that I didn't understand, and I was just writing it down. And as my house was being repossessed because I couldn't pay the mortgage, I just had a word processor left, and I was beavering away, writing down as much as I could before everything was gone. So these are fundamental questions, and the result was a book that I didn't actually get published until relatively recently, because I needed to find evidence to support the answers that I was writing down. The book is available on Amazon Kindle, and it's called the Tao of Natural Cycles. It's all about the philosophy of Taoism, or Taoism, which was the philosophy of Lao Tzu. So the book is the principles of how the universe works and our place in it from a philosophical and fundamental perspective. And bear in mind that this was before I was educated. This was before I went to university, so I didn't know anything at all. So all this information is being given to a complete naive layman who knows nothing about philosophy. And when I wrote the book, then I read it, and I thought, my goodness me, where's all this come from? And it was then that this spirit of Lao Tzu manifested himself through the young man in trance. And it was from there that I began to take an interest in spirit possession.
Well, understanding psychology, when you're seeing somebody who believes that they're spirit possessed, how do you separate their own ego, id, personality, their subconscious from something that's truly outside of them, something that is completely foreign to their host body?
Well, the answer to that is very, very easy, very simple. You just ask the question, who are you?
All right, and once they tell you, you're talking to Dave Schrader, you've put me under, and I say, my name is Eli Spence, and I begin answering questions for you. What is the protocol for that? How do you start to walk through the questions that you can, I'm hoping, or I'm guessing, that you're asking a protocol of questions that you'll be able to go back and hopefully be able to corroborate the information and answers that they're giving to you, correct?
Yes. I started off by working face-to-face on a one-to-one basis with clients who came to me. Now, I'm not clairvoyant or psychic in any way, okay? I don't see or hear spirit at all. So if a person thinks they are being influenced by spirit of some kind, I have to go through a process of inviting that person to go into a trance, into a hypnotic trance, and then engaging the possessing entity or the attached entity in dialogue with the client, with the patient, acting as a medium. So it's a simple case of questioning, who are you, what do you want, why are you here, and so on. Now, that was many years ago I worked in that way, but I've progressed quite a long way along the pathway now, and I work with people who are psychic and mediumistic, because I'm not. And I can work remotely. That means at a distance, by working with a medium. Say, for example, where are you, in Minnesota, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, okay, so I'm in London, say. You contact me from Minnesota and you say, Dr. Palmer, I've got a suspicion that I may be influenced by some spirit entity. I'm being made sick for no apparent reason, etc., etc. So I contact one of my colleagues who's a medium, and I'll say, okay, we've got a client here, a gentleman in Minnesota thinks he's being influenced. Let's see what we can do for him. So my colleague will go into a trance, and I'll say to him, okay, can you contact this gentleman in Minnesota and tell me what you find? And my colleague, will be able to see what is affecting you, and will be able to hear what is affecting you. So I can then ask the questions through the medium and engage the spirits in dialogue according to their particular nature.
Dr. Palmer, the type of spirits that are inhabiting people, that are possessing them, are they truly possessions, or are they hangers-on? Are they kind of the leeches? They're just hanging around us and influencing us. But when you open up this hypnotherapy, this connection, like you said, the human host becomes the conduit, becomes the medium for you. Does the spirit then step in and it become a form of possession to describe and dialogue with you regarding why they're there?
Well, there are lots of different kinds of spirit. Mm-hmm. This is a very difficult question to answer because there are so many different kinds. There are alien types from other dimensions, from other galaxies that are curious about human beings and treat us as guinea pigs in experiments, for example. In the same way that our scientists research animals on this planet, there are aliens that regard us as curiosities. there are the spirits of the deceased. Those are people who've died and who haven't passed over into the spirit realms where they're supposed to be. And in religious language, we can talk about going to heaven, for example, or the afterlife. If a person doesn't pass over to the afterlife properly and they stay earthbound, they can be attached or shadowing a loved one, or they can remain here to try to complete unfinished business. The earthbounds and the aliens are two major categories of types of entity. And the third type are the ones that, in religious language, might be called demonic. These are negative, non-human entities who either use the energy of the human being as a source of sustenance, like vampirism, for example, where they suck the energy. There are non-human entities that feed on fear and anger, because negative emotions have a powerful energy transmission. It's like a beacon. A person who goes through life full of fear or full of anger will be like a beacon, attracting these entities that feed off that energy. Do you understand?
Right.
So the range and type of entities is huge, and when you consider the prospect that the universe is infinite, then the range of entities is infinite.
Well, let's talk about the demonic realm then. When you're talking about some of these lower level entities, the demonic, what is it like when you make a connection through them? Is it usually a challenging, threatening, imposing type of thing, or explain that to us for people that are on the outside? All we get are the Hollywoodized versions, like The Exorcist. What is it really like?
What is it really like? The first thing I do when we encounter a powerful negative spirit entity that could be described as demonic, the first thing I do is consult with the guides that are working with us, and these are beings of light, that angelic, if you like. And I will say to them, is it in our interest to engage this entity in dialogue to understand it better, or is it better just to have it removed? And the guide will advise. And if this is a new kind of entity, new in my experience, the guide may say, well, for educational purposes, it could be useful to engage it in dialogue. And these conversations with these entities are truly illuminating. Whenever I get permission from the client that we're working with to use their case for educational purposes, then I'll actually put that dialogue on YouTube for people to listen to. I used to record cases visually as well as audio, but there's nothing interesting to see. It's just a picture of me talking to my medium colleague, and there's nothing very exciting to see because we're not very exciting people to look at. But it's the conversation that's interesting. So most of these conversations now are being recorded with audio. And we had one recently that was very, very powerful, very ancient. I asked what its nature was and where it came from, and it told me that it originated, it had always been with the earth before humans came to the earth. It's very, very ancient. But the first time it had interaction with human beings was during ancient Sumeria, which is our oldest civilization. And it told us that it just fed off the energy of human beings. It's the sort of entity that in religious language would be called demonic. Well, they don't like that term. They don't like being called demons. They're just, they are what they are. They are negative energy beings that feed off the vibration of human beings. And exorcism doesn't work. If you want one of these beings to be removed from a person, then they prefer to be treated with respect, and they prefer to be asked to leave. And when they are treated with respect and asked to leave, then usually they do. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Very interesting and understandable that if it's something especially that predates Christianity or religious beliefs, it wouldn't be necessarily moved by evoking the name of Christ or any religious leader. But when you're dealing with them, if they found a food source that they like, and I hate to say that it is a food source, but if they have an energy source that they like, why would they move on? If they feel this is what they want, why would they just be so willing to give that up, if you're polite?
Okay. It's an interesting question. Sometimes you can call in extra help from the spirit realms, from the universe. And you can say, you can ask, is there another source of energy for this being to use for survival? And if there is, can we show it where that is? So it will leave. And the beings of light come along and they help with that. And this usually works with parasitic energy forms that have no direct malintention. They just want to feed. So if you give them a different source of energy, they're quite happy to go along with that. Others know precisely what they're doing, and they've explained to me in the past, it's a bit like how we, as human beings, we keep cattle, right? We keep cattle for food. Mm-hmm. And we use those cattle to sustain us with their energy. And these beings treat us in a similar way. So if you ask them to move away from your client because the client is being made unwell, they're happy to do that. Then just go and find somebody else.
And that's it. It's just that simple. What about these cases then that you hear about where they are very violent? They're scratching people. They're causing them to want to commit suicide. They're, howling in the houses, scratching at the wood. Just all of the quintessential terrifying demonic realm. Is that a different style of demon or being that you're facing and dealing with at that point?
Yes, these are quite rare. In my experience, they're rare.
Right.
The archives on demonology and the archives held by the Church, the Catholic Church in particular, they do have documented cases along the lines that you describe. And it's these cases, of course, that provide the raw material for films like The Exorcist. In fact, The Exorcist was based on a real-life case,
right?
Case of Robbie Mannheim. But they are very, very rare. And these demonic entities, it is their deliberate intention to cause as much chaos and mayhem as possible. They have a hatred for human beings, and we don't know why that is. You can't negotiate with them. All we can do is call upon the highest realms of power in the universe, call upon God, Archangel Michael, to come along and help resolve the issue and take them away.
And dealing with the actual possession, we're under the concept and belief that we have to invite these things into us or give them permission in order for them to do the things they do. What is your findings? Is that true, or no, these spirits can kind of come and go as they please?
Yes, no, that is true. They need to be invited. There needs to be a vulnerability in the person. that invites them in. And now this can be done through stupidity. For example, people who choose to worship through Satanism, right? Which is a very, very foolish thing to do, but people do it, and they deserve everything they get. You have other people who are naive. There's been quite a rash of these cases recently. You have people with a curiosity about the spirit world and use instruments for what's become known as electronic voice communication. Mm-hmm. And these devices are freely available on the internet, and you can even have an app on your phone where you can invite spirit entities to communicate with you. And this is a bit like the Ouija board. It's a modern technological form of Ouija board. And now if you sit down with a Ouija board and you invite spirits to communicate with you, you are giving them permission. And where you have a demonic entity or a powerful negative entity that will come in and take possession, and then you challenge it and say, well, I was invited, and we have an agreement. So it's through naivety. Now, moving further along the scale, you have another dimension of naivety, and this is where people are made vulnerable through alcohol abuse or drug abuse, where they relinquish full control of their faculties, and the entity will come along and pretend to be a friend or a helper and pretend to help them through difficult circumstances, and you accept that friendship, you accept that help. Again, it's a form of contract. It's a form of agreement where you've allowed an entity to take possession. Another form is, if, say, for example, you want to be successful in business, or you're not very good academically and you want to pass your exams, and a spirit entity comes along and says, don't worry, I'll help you do that. This is the devil on the shoulder, the devil that whispers in your ear and says, I'll help you do that, but you need to allow me to come in whenever I want to. And if you enter into an agreement with such an entity, then you've got a serious problem. So in my work, in dealing with entities, we get all kinds.
All right. Talking about the science of spirit possession, I'm curious, how do your contemporaries view the science of spirit possession? Is this something that they're becoming more open and willing to at least kind of kick the idea and concept around, or are you still getting a lot of pushback on that type of topic?
There's still a lot of pushback. Mainstream science, mainstream psychology and psychiatry are still have roots deeply embedded in regarding spirit possession as an outmoded supernatural belief that has no place in the modern world. But research into, scientific research into the phenomenon actually began back in the 19th century. And this is what my book gave seed to my book, the work of Frederick Myers, who was one of the founders of the Society for Psychical Research in London. It was formed in London in 1882, and Frederick Myers was one of the founding members, along with the American psychologist William James and other notable intellectuals of the day. And what was happening at that time in North America and in Europe was there was a great fashionable surge and interest in spiritualism. And people would get involved in seances to communicate with the dead, and it became a bit of a parlor game in society. And the Society for Psychical Research was formed in order to investigate this scientifically, to see if there was any scientific reality to these communications. And an awful lot of work was done during the late 19th century to investigate this scientifically. And it was found that there was certainly empirical evidence to support the idea that the spirit of the human being does survive bodily death. In fact, Frederick Meyer's own book is entitled The Survival... just a minute. I just had to remind myself of this.
No problem.
Human personality and the survival of the personality, the survival of bodily death. That was his book. It was published in 1903. So that gave the foundation for my research. And I wanted to understand how it worked, how a spirit could influence a human being to the extent that it took over the human being, changed the behavior, and so on. And of course, what I discovered was that there is a very, very wide range of influences. And in my book, I explain this very, very simply. You have if you can imagine a wedge. At the very thin end of the wedge, you have subtle influences where an idea is put into the mind of a person. Rather like I was saying to you earlier, the spirit of Lao Tzu put ideas into my head in order to answer my questions, and that resulted in a book. This is one kind of spirit influence, very subtle, and you don't know it's happening. And on the other end of the scale, you've got those cases that are reminiscent of the demonic, cases like The Exorcist. So there's a very, very wide range of influences. And this is part of the scientific investigation into these phenomena, where you can place different types of spirit activity on this continuum. And each person, each individual, each one of us has a vulnerability on the continuum. Some people will not experience any kind of influence from the spirit world. And these are generally your scientists and your mathematicians, people who have a very, very robust sense of self and are focused on the material world to the exclusion of everything else. On the other end of the scale, you have people who have a fragmented sense of self, who dissociate easily, that is, go into an altered state of consciousness, lose their focus on the real world, and these are influenced by spirits. Now, on the positive side, you've got people who have a strong sense of self and can hear and see spirits and control what happens. These are your mediums and your shaman, your healers, hear voices and see spirits, but they don't lose control. A person with a very fragmented sense of self, people who dissociate, who are neurotic, can't deal with difficult situations or powerful negative emotions, these are more susceptible, and this is on your negative side. So at the extreme end of the scale where people are influenced, you have the positive medium and you have the negative, the psychotic. Putting it simply, so the science of spirit possession recognizes these scales and these ranges of influence and so on, and using psychological instruments, psychometric instruments, and those of your listeners who have an understanding of statistical testing in psychiatry and psychology will understand what I'm talking about. You can measure these things.
Let's do this. We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the science of spirit possession and releasing earthbound spirits. We'll hear some of the most unusual cases that Dr. Terence Palmer has investigated and looked into. We'll deal with that when we return. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
This is the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, and today we're looking at the science of spirit possession and releasing earthbound spirits. What can be done? Dr. Terence Palmer, our guest, as we discuss this topic. All right, Dr. Palmer, I know in your first book, The Science of Spirit Possession, which we have a link to that book up on our site and on our page right now. So however you're listening to the show on the podcast format, there will be a link so that you can find the book and get a copy for yourself. It'll probably take you right to our Killer Deals page, and you can find the book that way. But let's talk about some of the cases, some of the most active and bizarre things. I've got to guess, in all the years you've been doing this, you've seen some remarkable situations unfold.
Well, you say remarkable. This is day-to-day business, bread and butter to me now. And I've come to treat these cases as not remarkable at all, really. Now, if we go back to Frederick Myers, whose work I researched for my thesis, in his work, and William James said the same thing. They said that they agreed that the word supernatural has no real meaning because nothing is supernatural; it's all natural. And the word paranormal has no meaning because there's nothing that is above normal. It's all normal. It's just that not all of us experience these things on a day-to-day basis. But when you look at the surveys that have been conducted by various organisations in the 20th and 20th century and recently on people's beliefs and experiences in so-called paranormal and anomalous phenomena, they are everyday occurrences. It's just that the mainstream sciences, physics and chemistry and engineering, and the mainstream media don't really want us to acknowledge the everyday in these phenomena for some reason. It seems almost to me as if we're being deceived by the mainstream institutions as to what the reality is.
It does, but why is that? Why do you think that is? Is it because it's not something that they can scientifically put brackets around or compartmentalize and say this is what's going on, this is how it's going on, this is why it's going on?
Okay, let me see if I can answer this question as simply as I can. I see two explanations for this. On the one hand, if we can assume that scientists are genuine and honest, okay, then putting these phenomena into the current scientific paradigm is impossible, because the current scientific paradigm is physical. It's mechanistic physicalism with a three-dimensional universe, okay? 4 dimensions if you include time, and you hear scientists talk about the space-time continuum, all right? And when you see television programs about the universe, it's all about the physical universe, about space travel, and what we can see with the increasing power of telescopes. And what they're discovering about the universe is that it is indeed infinite, but it's physical. Now, that physical universe does not accommodate the non-physical. Okay? So scientists still find it extremely difficult to accommodate the idea of spirit beings or God or anything that is not physical and material, okay, on the one hand. On the other hand, when it comes to medicine, and this is my particular interest, I'm interested in what makes people sick as a psychologist. And as a psychologist, I developed my skills in hypnotherapy to investigate the hidden subconscious mind and find out what was causing illness. And when you invite a person to go into an altered state of consciousness, into a trance, if you like, so their mind dissociates away from the physical world, then you find the infinite universe that is non-physical. And you can go anywhere in the subconscious using the non-conscious mind. And this takes us into spirit realms. At the end of the day, really, people either believe in these realms or they don't. Now, when you get someone who has no belief in such things, but then they report sickness that can't be explained by medicine, and they present themselves for a genuine investigation and discover that there's a spirit entity or spirit entities that are interfering with them, you take them away and then you say to the person, are you feeling better? And they are. It gives evidence of the existence of these entities. Now, when you apply these principles to serious mental illness, psychosis and schizophrenia, the medical profession, psychiatry, has a monopoly. And this is very often why people are afraid to announce to even friends and close family that they are hearing voices, because they're afraid that they may get sectioned and put into a psychiatric hospital and put on antipsychotic drugs and labelled mad.
Right.
And this is a genuine fear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When in reality, the voices that they hear are coming from an external source, from an earthbound spirit or a negative entity that wants to deliberately confuse them and create problems. Now, psychiatry doesn't really want us to know that, because the antipsychotic drug industry worldwide is worth billions. So if you come along and you say, I can cure hearing voices and schizophrenia simply by negotiating with the voices and having them removed, then you remove an entire industry.
Now, I know I had the opportunity to meet with a couple of associates of yours when I was recently in England, and they were telling me about the work that you're doing, and that there was one of your patients, and they gave me no names, no real details, but this is part of what spurred me on to want to speak to you. They had a patient, they said that you had a patient that conventional medicines and psychology just was not helping. But once you got in and did your work with spirit release, this man's life was completely upended and cleared of the negativity that no other medicine, no conventional concept of psychology had been able to help. Can you tell me a little bit about that case, and do you know which one in specific I'm referring to?
Yes, I do. This was a case of a soldier, an ex-soldier. He'd been in the army, British Army. He'd served in Bosnia in the Balkan conflict, and he'd been to Iraq and Afghanistan. And he'd come out of the army and he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and schizophrenia and put on antipsychotic drugs. And he volunteered to come to us to be used as an example to demonstrate how the technique worked. And his case was filmed. It's on camera, it's on YouTube for anyone who wants to have a look. And he declares his name, so I have no reservation in telling you his name. His name is Mike Robinson. And he says, my name is Mike Robinson, and I suffered from hearing voices for 23 years. And now they're gone, using this method. And it left him free of the voices, but it also left him angry at the psychiatric profession, because he'd suffered for 23 years when it could have been dealt with much sooner had this method of treating people been used. Now, this method of treating people has been known for over 100 years, 150 years.
How is it then? How is it even possible that people aren't taking this more? And we're going to put a link up. What did you say the gentleman's name was?
Mike Robinson.
Mike Robinson. I'll see if I can dig that specific video up, but I'll put a link up to your your YouTube page so people can find that very easily as well and keep up with what you're doing. But if we know this is going on, and I understand that there's big money in big pharma, but this is still going on, are we not? Man, I would think as a doctor, I would much rather have a very healthy, happy client base, which I'm going to make money on by having massive amounts of people come through, because if I cure Mike Robinson, he's going to tell Jeremy Piven, and Jeremy Piven's going to tell, Pete Best, and Pete Best is going to tell him, right, you're going to just slowly build up an audience of people that are coming to you. You're going to make up in the money, I would guess, and maybe I'm being naive here, Dr. Palmer, but you would make up in the money that you might lose from the pharmaceutical angle just simply in word of mouth about the effectiveness of the work that you do.
Yeah, it's an interesting proposition, isn't it? I've become very, very cynical about this when I witness this, and when I talk to doctors and psychiatrists about it. And I've spoken to psychiatrists who are wringing their hands in despair back home here in the NHS, saying the system's falling apart, it's broken, we can't handle the demand, people are committing suicide, we've got no beds, we can't treat them, I'm losing staff, can't recruit psychiatrists, it's a mess. And you hear on the news from the politicians, Theresa May and so on, saying, we're going to put X millions of pounds into the mental health services, but all the time they're pouring money into doing the same thing, they're going to get the same result. And it's just going to be topping up the bank accounts of Big Pharma until they realise, until people in positions of power realise that there is this alternative. But it's getting the message across. They don't seem to be able to listen. Now, I attended a conference this weekend, just gone, in London. It was the 6th Congress on Medicine and Spirituality. And it was hosted by the British Union of Spiritist Societies. And Spiritism is a movement that's very popular in South America, in Brazil in particular. And Spiritist methods of treatment along the lines of what we've been talking about, the release of spirits and so on, and treating the spiritual aspects of the person, not just the physical. Spiritism has been incorporated into mainstream medicine in Brazil since the 1930s. Okay? Now, the Brazilians, the psychiatrists and surgeons, researchers and teachers come here every 2 years and hold a congress, not just this country, but other countries around the world, to teach these methods, to introduce these methods, okay? And I said to one of the organisers only last weekend, I sat down and had lunch with her, and I said, her name is Elsa Rossi, and I know she won't mind me mentioning her name. I said, Elsa, can you tell me of any institutions, scientific medical institutions in the UK that are currently applying these methods and conducting research? And she said, no, you're the only one I can think of. So it does raise the question, doesn't it? Why? And this is why I continue to do what I do. I'm working on a research project at the moment, which I'm happy to tell you about. There was, because we can do.
And I want to hear about what you're working on currently, but if I could ask real quickly, kind of going back to Mike Robinson, here you get this man that involved in the military, dealing with these voices, dealing with things that were bothering him. His life is upended. What were you able to do? Can kind of walk us through this meeting, and how many sessions does it take to kind of cut through the noise and the buzz and get to the spiritual effect of this and start to sever those ties?
Okay, well, it took 20 minutes.
Aha. See, this is part of the problem I've had with psychology and with seeing counselors. Everybody has to have a job. I understand it. I've never understood. I've gone in for counseling sessions looking to help me through different aspects of my life, and I found them more frustrating than I did any sense of relief. Because it would be something I'd be over, and they would dig and poke and probe and get me so pissed and irritated again by the end of our session that I went home feeling more lousy than I did going into the session. And I started to begin to realize, it seems to me in most of these cases, it's not about healing, it's about perpetuating the issue in order to be able to continue to bill and bring people in. You mentioned that you deal with this in kind of a cynical attitude, but would you say that's a pretty fair assessment from your view, that it's more about what can I do to continue billing as opposed to what can I do to solve this problem?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, and it's something that I've always disagreed with. I've always had trouble making money out of healing people, because the people who need help, most of the people who don't have money, and I think it's unethical to capitalize on people's suffering, and I'd rather get the job done quickly at the minimum cost. Now, in the case of Mike Robinson, I was very, very fortunate that we were able to, and the people you met on your visit to England were filmmakers, and they very happily provided their services in recording everything on film so we could put it on YouTube. So I made an event of his case, and we recorded the whole thing and had a discussion about it, and it's there for everyone to see. The session took, there were 2 sessions. Each session took about 20 minutes. We discovered negative attachments that were capitalizing on his vulnerability. And we also found earthbound spirits that were attached to him when in the war zone in the Balkans. It was a family that were killed in the bombing in Sarajevo. And they were attracted to him because of his compassionate nature. And it's one of the reasons why earthbound spirits are attracted to people, because they need comfort. And we were able to release both types of entity from him very quickly.
And how long had he spent with conventional medical wisdom on this case? 23
years.
And it damn near pushed him to wanting to end his life, right? I mean, you deal with this kind of deal and you're hearing these voices. What were the voices telling him? Were they self-destructive voices?
Yes, he describes them as like a gang that were constantly persecuting him. About 4 or 5 personalities, voices that were always there. Just giving him negative messages and pulling him down constantly, driving him to despair. It's like having a gang of people bullying you, but you can't see them.
All right, well, let me ask you this then. With your grounding in psychology, we all have that nagging little voice that's inside of us. I have it. I battle it on a daily basis, Dr. Palmer. That nagging voice that tells us we're not good enough, we're stupid, we're too fat, we're unattractive, we're not this, we don't deserve the success, we don't deserve the happiness, we don't deserve... How do we know that that's not just our own self-deprecation from things and kind of a form of PTSD of growing up and hearing things and being told things, and being able to separate that from something else as an outside influence nagging us and telling us these things?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And what I do in my work is I go through a protocol where I investigate all these possibilities. I start with uncovering those destructive, negative entities that are non-human, the demonic type and the aliens that are deliberately exploiting the vulnerable human being. We deal with those first, get them out of the way, because until they are gone, it doesn't matter what form of therapy or treatment you're going to apply. Until those entities are removed, any kind of therapy will fail. Okay? So if you're having counselling, psychotherapy, whatever, hypnotherapy, it's going to fail until those negative entities are removed. So we get rid of those first. Then we deal with the voices, and these are usually earthbound spirits that are attached to the person for some reason. We deal with the earthbounds, and we help them move on to the light. And then we look at the lower range frequencies, spiritual energy frequencies, and we look for the parasites. These are like bugs, insects, like spiritual bacteria. Just as we have bacteria and viruses in the physical domain that make us sick, and this is where medicine does help. Similarly, we have bugs and parasites that are interdimensional, and we have to remove those as well. Okay? And then when all these spirit entities of all these various kinds are removed, then we can start looking at the psychological makeup of the individual, because any treatment then, any therapeutic approach is going to work. And we look at the psychological makeup of the person. And I ask two fundamental questions. The first one is, are there any self-created thought forms here? And the second question is, are there any dissociated subpersonalities here? Now, the self-created thought form is, these come in a very, very wide range of forms. Perhaps let me see if I can use a simple example. As a young child, right, as a young boy, 5, 6 years old, feeling helpless and vulnerable, going to school and feeling unsafe, we want to feel safe. We want to feel stronger than we really are, okay? So we will create a thought form that is our ideal self. And this is why there is so much popularity in superheroes, in Superman and Wonder Woman and John Wayne, the hero. These are role models for vulnerable human beings to look up to, okay? And as young persons, we create them ourselves. This is the self-created thought form that gives us comfort and strength and hope, okay? And they are beneficial. Usually they're beneficial. You can also have a negative self-created thought form for a person who feels unworthy, ashamed of something, and these self-created thought forms will punish the person and beat them up, psychologically beat them up. Okay, so these have to be discovered, uncovered, and dealt with in an appropriate way. Then you have the second type that I mentioned, the dissociated subpersonality. And these are created spontaneously, automatically. They are an automatic self-preservation mechanism that the psychology automatically uses. If a person is being abused in their early years, if they're being sexually or abused or physically abused, they will dissociate. They will go into an altered state of consciousness in order to escape the punishment, escape the trauma. And the act of dissociation actually creates a subpersonality that is there to protect them, that is to take the punishment. I'm putting it very, very simply, but a person can have a whole family of dissociated subpersonalities that are there that are created from traumatic experiences. And these have to be uncovered and entered into dialogue with, because they are... Right now, this takes us into the realm of trying to understand the enormous creativity that the human being has. We are enormously powerful, creative beings. And we can create ourselves. We can create the person we want to be. We can also create the person we don't want to be. through misdirected thought or through traumatic experience. So when we're working with these subpersonalities, we have to work with them in a very, very creative and constructive way. And the objective is to bring them back in, to reintegrate with the core self so that the person becomes whole again and all the different aspects of their personality can become integrated and all work together in a cohesive whole. Because people who've been traumatized will have a fragmented personality. And this leads to dissociative disorders and schizophrenia. So that is the final, if you like, task of the procedure, to bring the dissociated personality, the fragmented self, back together.
Now, in the case of someone like Mike, he's been attacked, he's been attached before. Once that has happened, does that open you up for future attacks? And can that continue to affect you through your life? We'll talk about that in a second. Dr. Palmer, if someone has had an attachment and you were able to break them of this, does that leave a vulnerability in their psychic armor, if you will? Are they able to be reattached, or have you found a way to not only break these things but seal these holes, these portals, and keep people from, that aren't seeking it or trying to bring it back in, which I know is also an issue, but people that are honestly trying to break themselves of these situations, have you been able to find ways to effectively break that bond and leave it broken?
Yes, but only with the cooperation and common sense of the client, of the patient. If their attachment, if their vulnerability is due to genuine naivety and lack of education and understanding, then understanding and education will help protect them. On my own website, I have a facility there that provides help and guidance to anyone who wants to use it. There's a psychic self-defense protocol that can be used by anyone. It's a form of meditation where you, going back to what I was saying earlier about the enormous creative ability of the human being, you can create your own armor. You can put it around you, and you can put yourself in a bubble of light. All it takes is the focus of attention, and the protocol is there for everyone to use. And I always advise all my clients to use this protocol to keep themselves safe.
Do you believe that there are spirits that are around us? Are we holding court and realm with many different spirits at all times? And I know you kind of brought it up in the beginning that, our galaxy, our universe is vast. Are we dealing with not only human entities, but alien entities?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And it's very interesting to enter into dialogue with them. And they will, when I invite them to speak with me and explain to me what they're doing, many of them are happy to do so. And they'll actually name the star system that they come from. And
why are they so drawn to the human element? Why aren't they haunting their own planet, their own star system? Why are they coming here and messing about with our people?
Well, you can answer your own question. Yeah, it's curiosity, isn't it? I mean, you've only got to look at our own science fiction stories and series. Look at Star Trek. Where does the inspiration for that come from? For goodness sake.
Well, it was the 60s, and there was a lot of drugs going around, Dr. Palmer. It could be from that.
But these series are still being made.
That's true.
There's a new one, Star Trek Discovery. It's now being made with modern technology. But the themes and the stories, the threads that run through these series are all of a similar nature. It's about the investigation of other life forms, coming right the way back to the materialist scientific paradigm, where scientists believe that the only reality is the physical universe. You've got billions of dollars being spent on researching to see if there's microscopic life on Mars and the moon.
Right.
It's costing more money to do that than it would heal the sick on the planet. Now, to me, that's an absurdity.
Now, we just talked about that on Monday's show with Brett Butler. I said, yes, if that money was poured into our culture and we worried more about how to make people healthier here mentally, how to make people healthier here physically, how to feed the poor and home the homeless, that kind of money would be better spent here than worrying about if there's microbes on the planet, on the surface of Uranus. I don't care, right? Yeah. Let's just worry about what we've got going here.
I agree 100%. And I'll go a stage further than that. If modern science and medicine were to consider seriously what we are talking about today, there would be no need to spend a single dollar on going to the moon or to Mars or anywhere else, because the aliens are already here. We can communicate them. They're all around us. Some people can see them. Most of us can't. But and this comes down to in the study of consciousness, which is becoming fashionable in certain scientific areas. Some universities are taking research into the nature of consciousness seriously. We can investigate this and understand that if we want to explore the universe, we have to explore the interdimensional relationship between the physical and the non-physical. And once we understand that we can communicate with beings of other dimensions much more easily and much more effectively than you could possibly hope to achieve by sending shovels to Mars to see if there's any bacteria, then this world would be a much, much different place, because we would focus our attention on where it's needed and not on fantasy.
These mass shootings we're hearing about, and I know this is going to be a touchy subject, but we keep talking about the fact that mental health needs to be on the forefront more than gun control. Do you believe that some of these people that are some of these people that are out shooting up churches, shooting up schools, shooting up malls, are they dealing with a form of spirit possession? Or in these cases, do you believe that it's psychotic breaks because of the medicines and the conventional methods of mental health that they're receiving?
Well, I can answer your question from experience. The year before last, I was invited to go to the United States. I've been there 3 times in this past year. I was invited to go to the United States to work with some people in Michigan. And as soon as I arrived there, the head of the organization that I was invited by said to me, "We've just had a mass killing here in Kalamazoo County. A taxi driver just killed, I think it was 4 or 6 people, had just been arrested. Do you think there's any influence, spiritual influence at work here?" And I said, well, let's find out. Now, this gentleman, he'd invited me to go to the United States to help him and his colleagues learn spirit release techniques. So we used this as an example of how to communicate beyond time and space. And we sat down, and again, I've put it on YouTube, and I've used this example at 3 conferences last year, 2 in the UK and 1 in Finland, the recording, where I invited a medium to connect with the man who'd been arrested, and he was sitting in jail, and we connected with the entity that caused him to commit this crime and had a conversation with it. The other case that I dealt with when I was in Michigan was a young man. Now, this case came to my attention. I was visiting a friend for Christmas in Florida, and I was on a flight from Chicago to Florida, and this man sat next to me on the aircraft, and he was telling me about how worried he was about his son. And I said, well, it sounds very, very interesting. If you get the opportunity, I'd like to meet this young man. So when I went to Michigan, and this gentleman brought his son to meet me, and I sat with him, and I engaged him in conversation and asked him about the things that were troubling his father, about the voices and the impulses to deliberately hurt people, and asked him how he was dealing with it. He said, oh, I can deal with it, I can handle it. And I said, well, what if you can't? What if these impulses take over and you hurt somebody? You're going to finish up in jail, aren't you? And he said, well, I guess so, but I'm dealing with it. And I said, well, look, I don't think you are. And I said, we don't have to deal with it now. And I said to his father, take him home and we'll work on it remotely using telepathy. And we did. And we discovered what was causing the problem, and we removed these entities. They wanted to fight. They wanted to do battle with us, so we did battle with them, and we got rid of them. And the family reported that the young man was doing well. All the impulses had gone, and he was studying and working, and the family could relax. So there were two cases there. One where after the event, to investigate what caused the crime, and the other one, we managed to catch it before it happened. So in answer to your question, yes. Whenever I see news about mass killings, I'm certain in my own mind what we're dealing with. Now, I've mentioned this to my friends in the United States and said, look, when is somebody going to do something about this? When is somebody going to educate the authorities and teach them how to prevent this and teach them how to deal with this when it happens? It's not about gun law at all. It's about the mental state of people and how vulnerable they are to spirit influence. That's what it's about.
These people that we see on the streets, homeless people talking to themselves, that people have kind of cast aside as no longer viable parts of our society because of their mental illness. How many of them do you believe aren't really speaking to themselves but are truly, truly speaking to the spiritual realm?
At a guess, I'd say 100%. All of them.
So you believe that most mental illness, or all mental illness, is nothing more than the effect and influence of the spiritual realm or dimensional realm on these people?
No, I didn't say that, because I've had cases of mental illness and destructive behaviour in families where we've cleared out the negative entities. Negative entities are attracted to negative emotions, okay? So, for example, if you have a child, a newborn child, that is immediately taken away from its birth mother, and I know this is a very, very sensitive area for a lot of people, but when you take a child away from its birth mother, the bond of trust that is inherent between the mother and child, that's broken immediately in that moment, okay? And the child is then vulnerable to very, very powerful negative emotions: abandonment, distrust, anger, resentment. The child grows up with all these negative emotions. These negative emotions then attract spirit energies that will feed off that emotion, okay, and reinforce the challenging behaviour. All right? Now, a person who's experienced such an early life will be presented for psychiatric treatment, and we can clear the negative energies away, but still you have the original cause that goes back to the birth trauma, and that's extremely difficult to deal with. Now, when such a person has negative emotions that are unacceptable, and I reinforce the word unacceptable, and what is unacceptable to such people is abandonment. and rejection, okay? But their behavior is so challenging that it's almost impossible to help them because they can't trust you. And they will force you to abandon them, which is what they don't want. It's the conundrum that these people live with. Because the situation is repeatedly unacceptable, then they will resort to creating in their own minds a fantasy world. And this is genuine mental illness, because they can't face the reality of the real world. So they go into a fantasy world. It's a form of protection, psychic protection, but it means that they just can't deal with reality, and that is a form of mental illness that's very difficult to treat.
Well, Dr. Palmer, I can't thank you enough, and I know I'm going to want to revisit with you about this and speak further. Let's keep in touch. I would also like to invite you at this point. I'll say I'd love to have you with me on Coast to Coast AM at some point to talk about this on a national scale and have people call in with their thoughts and questions regarding this type of therapy. If people need help, can they reach out to you, Dr. Palmer? Is there a way to get help and get some therapy, especially if they feel that their children or their own sanity is at risk at this point?
Yeah, it's very easy to do, really. Just need to Google my name, Dr. Terence Palmer. I've got a website that's called Healing the Wounded Spirit, and there's a procedure to go through if people need help. They can fill out a form online, submit it, and I'll work with my colleagues and fit them into a schedule and do the best we can.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to talking to you again. The book, The Science of Spirit Possession, is out. We'll have links up to that. He's got a new book, new program that he's working on releasing earthbound spirits. This may be the step forward we need. And I know there's a lot of you that listen to the show that are skeptics and just like to enjoy for the topical side of this, but you need to start questioning what if. Until we start to truly evaluate and look at these therapies and look at the possibilities, we can't judge them summarily, passing them over with a broad stroke, saying that this is insane, impossible. Because remember, most medical breakthroughs have started with somebody believing that it is insane and impossible, and it isn't until people start giving it a try. And what is the effect? What's the possible worst that could happen if you were able to do some work with somebody and it didn't work? It can't be any worse than the current state of psychiatry and overindulging in medical placebos. It's something we need to consider. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with another brand new edition of The Best in Paranormal Talk Radio. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is Beyond the Darkness.